Because everyone's talking about it. No,
I want to be cool.
Yeah, I want to be with the cool kids.
Hello and welcome to episode 133 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing, the F is for well you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott. I'm no rockstar, but I've picked up a thing or two over the last 20 years on my tour from sysadmin to CMO, and each week I chat to the true rockstars, my fabulous guests and chums, and share with you some marketing street knowledge that hopefully will inspire your inner rockstar. Come say hello. We are Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we are proud members of the Marketing Podcast Network. This episode is recorded on Friday the 23rd of September 2022. I hope you had a good week. You are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. On this week's episode in the marketing studio, Jeff Clark and I talk about customer data platforms. I go backstage with my chum Liz High, who's written a book, and as I screwed up my recording scheduling this week, we dip into the Rockstar CMO Virtual Bar archive for a classic chat with Robert Rose. But first, we need to pay the bar tab. I'll be back in a moment.
We'll be right back after this word.
We'll be right back
After this word.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe.
On to our first segment, the marketing studio with Jeff Clark. If you're new to this podcast, Jeff is our resident Rockstar CMO advisor and former Forrester Serious Decisions research director. Welcome back, Jeff, or is it you welcoming me to the Jeff?
Yeah, that's a good
Rockstar CMO.
That's a good question. Since we're both remote in our home offices, then whose studio is this anyway? I think I think you paid for the the podcast link. I paid for my own microphone, so I don't know. It's maybe we share this.
Well, it's the Rockstar CMO studio with Jeff Clark. So
yes,
yes. Anyway, so welcome us both to the studio. and this week, I think we want to gloss over the weather, don't we? Because it's not that nice.
It's pretty shoddy.
And for people that don't listen often, Jeff is in New England, aren't you, mate?
Yes, and you're in Old England, and
I'm in Old England.
Yeah, and for anybody who's interested, we've basically gotten, I think, 2 months of rain within the first 3 weeks of September, so we're continuing on that trend. And yes, we're in our mucklucks.
Yeah, we just have something grey and miserable today. But anyway, that's the weather taken care of. But this week, as we promised last week, we are inspired by former guest and friend of the show, Simon Daniels, now principal analyst at your old crew, Forrester. And he's written an article about CDP, which we found quite interesting. He was talking about whether you should build or buy. But it got us onto the topic of CDPs or customer data platforms, which we don't think we've covered on the podcast.
We have not covered it before.
No. So we thought we'd discuss it. Now, I need to declare an interest on this, in that I'm the CMO of Spotler Group, and we have a CDP in our group called Squeezely. So I'm slightly biased, so I'm going to let you do most of the opinionating on this one. And we're not, and unlike last week, we're not going to do one hit wonder or wonderful, because
don't touch that.
I shall argue that it's definitely a wonderwall.
It's definitely, and I think I would definitely agree. Not that we have to, and I, I think we'll avoid individual vendor CDP offerings. You can always consult your Wave or your MQ to find out
Yes. All right. So let's start with the basics. So for the listeners that have not come across this particular 3-letter acronym, and we love our TLAs, don't we? In this
love
industry?
TLAs.
What is a CDP, mate?
So a customer data platform is basically it's a software app, and it could be packaged from a vendor, could be something you build, bespoke custom software. But what it does is it unifies customer data from multiple sources that helps you improve the quality of the data, gives you tools for the analysis of the data, target help you improve targeting, personalization. Just there are all kinds of benefits which we'll kind of cover, but the thing is that I think many people might say, as we describe it, many people say, well, I have that, but I didn't know I had a CDP. Well, the term CDP came, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. And a lot of the sort of the buyer beware is that a lot of the data vendors out there, people providing data, started to say, we have a CDP. And that's the, again, as we sort of go through the pieces and parts of it, that's where you have to evaluate when you're hearing about that, when you're looking at it, you really try to understand, well, what is it that you're providing that you would call a CDP? And certainly, as I mentioned, you can consult the analysts to look at, what their definitions are and what they say you can get out of it, et cetera. But yeah, it's hot. It's definitely hot.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, actually, Jeff. Isn't it? At the moment, it's difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff in terms of the fact that CDP amongst marketers become such a buzzword, and like you say, so many vendors are claiming to have a customer data platform. And the interesting thing I find about it is that the point of a CDP really is it comes from multiple sources and is kind of an independent arbiter, isn't it, of your data, and that's kind of bringing that together and making that central hub. But there's lots of other vendors that are claiming, no, we can do that. We can own all your data, right?
Well, and a lot of vendors, that when you think about the sort of the big triumvirate of applications in a marketing tech stack, a CRM system, the marketing automation platform, the web content management system. I mean, a lot of the vendors that are in those spaces have either purchased, acquired, built the CDPs that are adjuncts to their main app because again, they're masters of a lot of the important information. So they feel if I provide you the web CMS and I provide you the CDP, and I provide you some marketing automation tools, now I'm providing the one-stop shop.
Well, that's the battle, isn't it? Is the battle for who is the single source of truth for either customer insight or content or whatever it is, right? All the vendors want to be that single source or the single orchestration place if we're talking about marketing automation, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned, an organization might already have a CRM or something like that. So why would I want a CDP, Jeff?
Because everybody's talking about it. No,
I want to be cool.
Yeah, I want to be with the cool kids. Yeah. Yes. So it fulfills on the promise of data unification. And so then you might say, well, what is that? So, any organization that has a good handle on its customers, understanding their engagement, their satisfaction, loyalty, the business, the value that provide the business, where revenue is coming from, you've got to have a way to unify data across the many different systems that would provide that so that you can, build good customer profiles, the utopia of a single view of the customer, so you can orchestrate engagement across channels. I want to make sure I'm following up, through my marketing automation platform with people who are engaged on my web platform, improving the whole targeting and personalization. Again, another holy grail. And then also just being able to do good measurement and analysis of your campaigns, or from a sales perspective, being able to do sort of like predictive demand analysis. Where are my best customers, or where's my next set of best customers coming from? So in order to get to any of those good things. And certainly anywhere where I have either worked or observed clients who've been able to do that, they have a centralized data repository that they can build on. And so today that's called a CDP. In the old days, I don't know, back in the 2010s and earlier, might have been a data warehouse or a data lake, or I don't know, a data swimming pool, or a data that's one thing I could never understand is like, so how is a data lake different from a data warehouse is different but anyway, so you get tied up in the buzzwords, but still, it's like, you really have to be able to pull data into a single source to be able to make it effective for you.
Right. So I understand why I would want one, or at least why I would want to centralize all my customer data. So what's the best next steps then of going about acquiring one of these solutions?
Well, I think one thing is to understand, do you already have one? And so if I'm sitting in marketing and maybe I went to trade show and I talked to a CDP vendor and I'm like, oh wow, I'm just also really excited about this, and then I go back and I start talking about it, and then somebody says, well, you realize we have an enterprise data warehouse or something, there's a IT or some corporate organization already has built something, and they may have built something that certainly could act as a CDP, or they may have just built something that is actually the basis upon which to build a CDP, or it may be like various companies I've worked at, the system of record for customer data. I mean, back in the aughts, it was an ERP system. And then as I move, at least the companies I worked at, you move into the next decade, then people thought it was, it might have been the CRM, but then it's like, well, our CRMs are really not functioning well as a system of record. So we're going to pull out all of that and merge it with other data in a data warehouse. Okay. So now I've got that. So I think that's the first starting point, is to kind of just do the sort of self-analysis and to say, what do we got that actually is a master record for customer data, and then you can start down the path of figuring out where you go next.
I think that's great advice for anything, isn't it? I mean, marketers were always like, we hear a TLA or we see something at a trade show, we see a shiny object. I mean, yes, we need one, but so many of our marketing technology stacks are like these Franken stacks of these things that have been cobbled together, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you don't need a CDP because maybe you do already have your customer data in one place. But what I thought was interesting about what you just said is, so is this just for the marketing team to be able to implement this, or is there something in the requirements that makes it a bit bigger than that?
It when you think of, I mean, that's where, particularly if you call it a customer data platform, well then, I mean, there are lots of functions within an organization that are interested in customer data, so it could be services, or could be, and obviously sales. So it's obviously an interest of marketing and obviously of interest to sales. But, do you have other groups that are involved in corporate planning, services, customer support, et cetera, that either are, would want to be able to leverage what a CDP offers, and also, they may have tools that they're using, which therefore become either feeds into your CDP or just something you have to deal with. So therefore, you want to figure out, who all those stakeholders are, and they become your buying group, or your whatever, your purchasing committee, whatever it is that you need to pull together. Because if you go off and invest in buying a CDP and you haven't talked to anybody in sales, you're dead. If you haven't talked to anybody in any of these other organizations, you may not be dead, but you certainly will be wounded. Pulling that group together to make because this is definitely going to be it may not just be, a collaborative purchase. I mean, this is going to be maybe perhaps an organizational wide requirement to purchase, and so therefore you got to pull in a lot of stakeholders.
Right, but like like we were saying a moment ago, I think a lot of the use cases seem to be very marketing and sales focused. But when you're talking about things like account management and service, is presumably from, if we get the data together, we can predict things like churn, or we can look at a customer's usage of a SaaS product, for example, and we can pull that in and use that as insight, right? So it really is an enterprise-wide platform, right?
Yeah, when I was at Pegasystems, so this is in the 2010, and beyond, is that we did have a data warehouse that pulled in, support information and services information. So in addition to the sales and engagement from the website and engagement from our development platform or development portal and from our marketing automation tool. So, what one of the things that we were able to provide to salespeople was, look, we can see where service requests were, we can see where issues are, we can, and so that gives, this was the old way of doing it, and it becomes more difficult to build it in management, but that was a way to just say, here's the health of your customer, in terms of how many people at the company are engaged, what the issues are, what are they posting on the development platform that we may need to inspect.
Well, I think that's interesting, because we're always talking about new solutions, but the problems are the same, right? And all it is it's trying to solve those problems. So it's thinking about what's the purpose of what we want to use this for, right? And like you've mentioned that there's a gap. You need to identify you've got a gap in the stack, but like what's the purpose of this?
Yeah. And that's and this is where you don't just want to mimic what the sales pitch was. So the vendor, gives you the utopia, the nirvana of having all this information. But then if you're going to do both your gap analysis, and if you're going to prepare for your business case for this, then you've got to be really clear on, why are we doing this? Are we just doing this to track and do a better job on executing on demand? And certainly there were companies that I was exposed to when I was at Forrester, where it's like they were not using a CDP, but they were using their CRM system and analytics tools that also looked at intent data, and kind of just, if you're just trying to track demand, they were able to do it without literally having a CDP.
Right.
Or are you trying to get a comprehensive view of the customer journey? And then this is where, you're sort of bordering into the whole customer journey and analytics, MarTech space. But again, a CDP could offer that promise. Are you trying to, look at, count scoring, again, we talked about personalization, and predictive analytics. So being really crisp on what the purpose is going to be critical for doing your gap analysis.
Yeah. And I think, we always look at things from a bit of a B2B lens, but it strikes me that where you're going to see huge value with a CDP would be in B2C, where you've got a lot of data that you can use, right, to identify personas, trends, do some personalization, although personalization is a bit of a grubby word at the moment, but be relevant.
Yeah, but in B2B, you've got tools out there that can look at engagement from accounts across lots of different platforms, including intent data, et cetera, and that becomes a valuable input into a CDP from a B2B perspective.
Well, I think that's a good segue to think about that. So if an organization is contemplating a CDP and they've identified that absolutely they have this need, there isn't an existing solution that has all of those data points in one place, they're looking to do that single view, what sort of data will they need to integrate into the CDP? Where are we going to get that from?
Yeah. Yep. So certainly there's the kind of the core pieces of your CRM system, your the data from your website, the data from your marketing automation platform. Right. So those are certainly, from a marketing and even from a sales perspective, those are the core pieces. And then there's sort of an extended set of marketing technology that again, depending on what the purpose is. I mean, if you've got social listening tools, you may want to pull in that information. If you're doing intent monitoring or you're doing digital advertising, you'll want to pull in any kind of intent signals you get from those platforms. And then you get into kind of a layer that's outside sales and marketing, which is, just what else do we have in the organization that is, that's gathering data about customers. So there again, your accounting system or your ERP system will have all kinds of information about the value from a revenue perspective of the customer. Again, some of the other things I mentioned in terms of tracking service records, support records. If you do any kind of customer loyalty surveying, NPS and other types of tools like that, you want to be able to pull that information into the CDP as well. And kind of as you build out your list of stakeholders, you almost are, in parallel, you're building out your list of potential inputs into the CDP. And understanding what again, a deeper sense of the purpose and then the quality of information you can provide in executing on that purpose.
Right. So it's yes, yes. I suspected we were going to be challenged from a time perspective covering CDP, so we're coming up. This is interesting in that we're bringing all this stuff together, and we're also thinking about what we're going to use it for. So it's not just bringing data together for the sake of it. We need to think about that purpose, what we're going to use the data for, and all that kind of stuff. And also, I was thinking as you were chatting there about the benefit to the customer is that I know that people find some of this stuff creepy about multi-channel engagement and being consistent across all the channels, but it actually stops us from making some stupid mistakes, doesn't it, when we try and do personalization? Yeah, so absolutely, full well that this customer is not using your product or heavily using your product or bought your product, so you can deal with them differently. So to the article that we were inspired by to talk about CDPs from Simon, he was talking about build versus buy. Now, we know, I'll add a link to the article in the show notes, and so people can see his conclusion. But what's your view on that?
Well, I think that so historically is kind of inferred from some of the examples is that I mean, people used to build these things, and so that's, I think, still a viable option. But then you got to understand: do you have the skills in house? Again, do you have some of the tools and components that are getting you partway there? And then do you have the skills in house to do that? And if you're in a big organization like an IBM or an SAP or something like that, you have the skills in house, whether you're managing it properly. If you're a smaller organization, you're likely going to have to, understand whether you've got the budget to purchase. And so I think that's where, this, you've got to build the business case, which gets you into the, not only have I figured out, who the stakeholders are, what the gaps are, what we can get out of it. I've got to actually, quantify what those benefits are going to be, and I've got to quantify what those costs are going to be for us to get there. I mean, a big warning to a lot of people who are interested in this is that, this is going to be likely a multi-year venture for you. I mean, it's when you think about just doing the justification, actually purchasing, implementing the change management that's involved. I mean, this to get people to where you're actually adopting and realizing the benefits. I mean, this is going to take time.
Big change.
And it's not to put you off doing it, because again, if you want some of those benefits of the nirvana of unifying the data, then this is what you're going to have to do.
Well, I mean, I think as well from my experience at CDPs is that there is some low hanging fruit. You can get some early value from starting with CDP, but you need to really understand that in order to do the full move, you're right. It's a commitment, isn't it? And today we're going to do maybe a small piece of personalization on the website or whatever, but then we're going to do more, and we've got to bring, because as we were saying, the more data you have in your CDP, the more valuable it's going to be both to you and to your customers, right, in terms of who you're interacting with.
And it could be something that you phase in, is that you understand, like today, our CRM is our single source of truth. okay, is there something that we can amend to the CRM to get us that next step? And then if I looked out, 3 or 4 years, can I build my way to having a really more holistic, sophisticated CDP?
Well, I mean, the first thing is I always think that single source of the truth thing is all well and good until you try and get everybody to agree to it. Right? Everybody's got their own single source.
Well, and you and I know the single source of truth is this podcast. So,
very nice you say. Yes, and the other, also I think that what we're seeing here is some of the common themes that we always talk about in terms of advice for buying any solution, don't we? So perhaps we should revisit that on one of these episodes. But okay, mate. So that CDP is really quickly done in 23 minutes so far. So the last agenda item, we've done the weather, we've done CDPs, we've given a hat tip and a nod to one of our chums, friend of the show, Simon Daniels. And what song are we going to go with?
Well, there's an artist out there whose name is just calling out to be picked here. His name is Big Data, and he's got a tune called Put Me to Work. And he talks about, I want to help you. I want to save you time. I want to take care of you. I want to ease your mind. The buyer beware for the song is that later in the lyrics, he says, I will replace you. So when you're buying a CDP, make sure you've got a role in its future.
Splendid. So I'll play out with Big Data, Put Me to Work from 2019. Can you believe it, Jeff?
Can you believe it?
Cool kids. All right, mate. And hopefully, will you be in the marketing studio next week?
I'll be there.
Excellent. I'll see you then, mate.
Cheers.
Thank you, Jeff. That was Put Me to Work by Big Data from 2019. A great CDP primer from Jeff there, and our usual advice when selecting a new marketing technology, which we'll come back to next week. And thanks to Simon Daniels, Principal Analyst at Forrester, for his inspiration. I will include a link to his article in the show notes, as well as all of Jeff's links. Time to go backstage with my guest and chum, Liz High, an insight ninja, marketing strategist and author. She's worked with virtually every industry on both the client and agency side, using data-driven insight to help shape content, campaigns, and brand value. Her clients have included everyone from tech giants Microsoft, Dell, and Amazon to entertainment heavyweight HBO. Her passion and consulting practice is focused on supporting startup and growth fintechs, banks, and credit unions to innovate, embrace brand thinking, and tell resonant stories that drive growth. Aside from being from Scotland and based in Seattle, she's like a sister from another mister, as she, like me, loves Chelsea Football Club, a gin and tonic, and the occasional glass of wine. And of course, marketing. And now she's written a book. Great to catch up with Liz. Hope you enjoy this conversation. Welcome, Liz, to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I've known you for many years, and it's about bloody time, probably, that I have you on the show. So thank you very much for coming on. Yeah. But for people that don't know you, Liz, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So I think, without revealing age, I'd probably describe myself as a highly experienced insight, research, strategy, and kind of marketing professional. So if you were to look at my career, I've done pretty much everything from, starting very early in government and learning, a lot about insight, data and research there from a kind of social perspective. Moving on to my more glamorous roles, where I work for the likes of McLaren Racing Team. I did really bizarre jobs like kit census on the European golf tour, where I'd have to kind of go and chat with golf caddies to work out what all the pros were wearing, their socks, their, whatever.
Wow.
And there's a whole industry out there that sells that stuff. And really then moved on to being a full-scale agency person, setting up my own business, which I ran for about 13 years. And
I'm going to ask you about that in a moment.
Company, which is how you and I met.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to come to that in a moment because you founded that with our mutual chum, Misha Trump, who I had on the show on episode 63, which goes to show how long I've left it to talk to you, Liz, which is a bit embarrassing, really. But yeah,
it's all right. I'm not offended. That's okay.
And I also like the way you're talking about how to describe your experience. I think I've taken to calling myself seasoned.
I like that one, actually. Yeah.
But one of the things, so recently you've written a book, which is what piqued my attention, and you were kind enough to send me a copy, and I think it's super. So I thought it'd be a good thing to share with the listeners. And it's called "Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank," which I think is. I've got that correct, right?
Yeah.
And we'll be discussing your book quite in detail because we've got plans for this, haven't we, Liz?
We have indeed.
We'll talk about it a bit. But give us a quick overview of what the book is about.
Yeah, certainly. So, it comes back to, a lot of the work I've been doing recently is focusing on financial services businesses, both in fintech world, banks, credit unions. I live in the US now, although I don't sound like it. So I've been doing quite a lot of work with kind of emerging US financial brands and kind of apps in particular. And I find myself, when I was working with banks and credit unions, going through the same kind of conversations, hearing the same challenges, the same reasons for not doing things. And I felt like I wrote the book jointly, actually, with Alison Netzer, who is CMO of Nimbus, which is, a big kind of fintech in the US. And both of us were spending time going through the same conversations. And it occurred to us that, we're really passionate about this idea that banking can change people's lives. If your financials, if money is working for you, life is just better.
That's true.
And the only people that can do that is banks, credit unions, and fintechs today. So we kind of took all of our combined knowledge for, our equally long careers and thought, what have we learned? What are the principles that are going to help banks to think a bit differently? How are we going to make banks as successful as Patagonia? How are we going to make banks successful as Porsche? So kind of taking all of the experiences that we've had working with big brands like that and applying it to a bank and a financial kind of series.
I love it. And we're going to talk much more about this. I'm really looking forward to it because when I read the book, I was thinking, well, this applies so much to a lot of organizations that, especially, as you know, my background is B2B tech. So I think a lot of tech organizations have the same challenge where they're thinking about their product rather than thinking about the importance of brand, importance of what people think about them and how they perceive them. So it's anyway, we'll get back to the book in a sec. The point of this part of the interview, and we'll talk about the book a lot, but this interview is to get to know you a little bit, Liz. What inspired you to start that marketing career, or more specifically, marketing research and insight? Because I know you've got a history with that. What got you into it?
So I think I like evidence, and I like data, and I like reasons for doing things. So I think it all started very early in my career when I was involved in doing things like census collection, data analysis, working out how to get money for local and community projects. And all of that had to be based on who lives here, what are they like, what needs have they got, what problems have they got. And I got this real passion for understanding the world that I lived in and the other people that lived in that world. And it just seemed like a very natural place to start a career, is if you want to do, make some changes in the world, which I think we all do. You want to, think about what's going to make a difference in people's lives, in my life, in my family's life. That's coming up with experiences, products, and solutions that are rooted in what people really, really need.
Right.
And that's where
and the way. Yeah, no, I love that. And what was your first role? Was that when you founded the agency? When you founded Intrepid, was that kind of light bulb moment, or had you been working your way up to that?
So we've been working way up. So Misha, we talked about Misha earlier. Misha and I had worked for a very specialist, really quite cutting edge boutique agency. And how we met is Misha was actually on secondment to Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And I was the account director on Microsoft for the agency. Wow. And then what Misha and I kind of discovered was that we had a very particular way of looking at the world, where we didn't do just research and write a report about numbers and whatever all the numbers said, but we got really into the insight and the storytelling. And you got to remember, this is like maybe 30 years
some time ago.
That was before the whole concept of being storytellers existed.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always fun hanging out with you and Mish anyway, and the stories you guys tell from back then, because you were in London then, weren't you?
We were certainly in London then. We were in London in a big way then.
That's true. And was it the Microsoft connection that took you to Seattle then?
So yes, it was. So we had the agency in London, but both Misha and I were spending so much time flying back and forward to Seattle. So in that kind of, Microsoft way, they very politely said, you want to keep doing all this stuff, you need to set up, a Seattle institution. So that's what we did. Misha, I stayed in UK and ran the European side of the business, and Misha went over, to set up the Seattle business.
Right. Well, that's where I've always known you guys, right? You're in Seattle now, aren't you?
I am in Seattle now. Yeah, it's my new home. I went there 10 years ago, swearing that I was only staying for 2 years, and now you're going to have to carry me out.
Well, I know. I mean, from that, I mean, we did sort of blur over like how many years ago that was, but you were very early into that, and presumably, and then life changed. And I mean, the world changed rather. And what I know you guys for is the way you've used things like social media, modern tools. Yeah. Tell us about that, Jenny. And what's changed in your sort of history with Insight?
Yeah. So part of the reason that you and I ended up meeting is that we were at this really interesting kind of intersection of the digital world and the real world. Yeah. We're not talking like metaverse. We're talking suddenly at a point where we were really starting to do what we call kind of digital ethnography. Mm-hmm. So as kind of culture moved to be much more online than real world, we took all the principles of observational research, which we typically would have done. So as an example, both Misha and I kind of traveled the world with Microsoft, going into people's homes and observing them using technology.
Right.
Thinking about what does that mean? Observing them playing games, observing them just meeting with their families. So we thought, okay, well, that's great. But there's this whole culture that's online now. How do we take those same practices and apply them to digital communities?
Right. And then you were early in using like the Facebook feed and all that kind of stuff, weren't you? In doing that, And
what that kind of lent itself to was, Misha's from a mathematical background. I'm much more from a kind of social sciences background. But both of us were really interested in the gazillions of pieces of content and opinion that were just being shared openly in social channels, but no one really knew how to analyze them.
Right.
So again, the same principle is how can we take all this really messy, massive data and turn it into insights?
Right.
And we started using some of the very early social media tools at that point.
Yeah. And it was SM2, wasn't it, at the time? Yeah. And you guys then got acquired, and we met, which is great. But back sort of, I want to ask this question in a more sophisticated way, but I'm going to say it as it is. But why is this research so important? What is it that marketers are understanding from the work that you guys do?
I mean, it's about getting underneath what really, really matters to customers. So as marketers or brand people, I mean, we're kind of a little bit egotistical. Yeah, it's a fact. We all, we admit it, because it's about our brand, our business, and we want to ask you the questions that we want to know the answers to.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that is the traditional research methodology. Yeah. Answer my questions that I know I want to answer you. What we always try to do as a business, and why I kind of love kind of social data, is we don't have control over what's produced. We can ask questions of that data. Yeah. But if we listen and analyze that properly, then you really get underneath what actually is important, what people actually want to talk about, and most importantly, the language that they want to use when you talk about it back to them. Yeah. So if you think about this idea of resonance, that's what it's all about.
Yes, and you guys have always got the good language as well, you and Misha. I mean, I love the resonance and relevance and all that kind of good stuff. Is that what you found is different? Because obviously surveys and stuff like that are kind of, there's a certain kind of person that fills in a survey, right? So you're not going to get a good picture of the whole community. But you find with social, you've got that depth of answering the questions that maybe you didn't think to ask, if you see what I mean, or somebody didn't want to ask.
Yeah. And I think I think one of the challenges with the industry, or certainly when, Misha and I started working in it, is that basically the tools that were out there were quite blunt instruments. And all anyone really thought about was the concept of sentiment. So is my brand good or bad? That's pretty much all that social media data could do.
Right.
But we applied all the principles of, structuring data. So, and I believe in surveys. I'm a great fan of the traditional kind of focus group, all that kind of stuff. But I use that as a way to then interrogate the data set. Okay. Right. So if you can, for example, learn what are the trigger words that suggest someone is actually in a buying journey. What are the trigger words that suggest that someone's on a journey to brand advocacy?
Right.
And if you can learn the language from talking to real people, then you can be super smart about how you pull the data sets out of social. And it becomes very actionable at that point. It's not just brand, it's action.
Right, and I think the perception there is the action is to engage with that particular consumer, but I think the action is actually learning the language of the consumer for the next consumer, right? So that you know what brand attributes are important to the consumer that you need to convey, right?
Exactly, and I mean, you're the king of content, so you know that part of a conversation. When you're having it face to face, you mirror each other's language, you take, cues from the conversation to develop your ideas. That's what so well-structured social data allows you to do. Yeah. So when you start applying kind of AI techniques, we talk a lot about topic modeling, and that's really getting underneath the top 10 things, the language, the themes that you need to be part of. Yeah. And a lot of that's about just being in the right parts of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm fortunate to have worked with you guys on a few projects, and that's critical as a content marketer, is what are going to be those really important topics, and how is it that the audience describes those topics? How do they describe your products? How do they describe the problem that your product solves? All of that good stuff. And that comes out of your research. And I've enjoyed working with you on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I think when you're thinking about particularly, positioning statements, messaging, and then all the way up to your campaign planning. Yeah. If you can be aligning around the themes that are emerging, you're ahead of the market. It gives you a real competitive edge, and it's data driven. And again, that to me, I'm coming back to numbers are important, insights are important. Data-driven content's important when you're building a brand.
Yeah. I've been in the room a couple of times where Misha's defended, the work because of data, and I see the look of frustration in her face when somebody tries to come up with one of their gut feeling. The highest person in the room saying, "No, our customers think this." No, Here's the data. This is what it says. I think it's and that trumps everything, doesn't it? When you have those conversations about brand. Anyway, I'll just looking at the time. I'm always doing this. I get carried away. Let's get back to your book, because I bet I had, hadn't I? But what I'm interested in with the book, because we will talk about the book a lot. We're going to serialize it. I'll talk about that in a bit. But a lot of us marketers, and thinking about our listeners, we think we've got a book in us. What was the process for you to write the book? How did you find that process?
At first, it felt really, really daunting.
Yeah.
And then what I did is I looked through, I've got one of those files that's called Stuff I've Written on my PC. And I actually went through that and I was like, you know what? I've probably written 3 or 4 books. Mm-hmm. But I've never written them all in one time. But there's a lot of kind of content. And that was sort of the starting point. And as I said, I wrote it jointly with Alison. At that time, we were working together at Nimbus. And we just started having weekly meetings where we kind of, we shot the shit about stuff.
Yeah.
And then suddenly we started to see these kind of themes that were coming through in our one-to-one conversations. And actually, our CEO at that point said, why don't you two just write a book? And I'm like, all right, well, why don't we? And then I kind of confessed it was always a bucket list item for me. I'd always wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And then we just kind of got going. We did like a few thousand words, a week.
Yeah.
And then we got an editor to help us to kind of make us be more structured in our thinking. To take away all my terrible typos, and it just kind of came out from there.
Did you just grab a freelance editor, or was that something from the publisher or from?
Yeah, we did it through a publisher. So we engaged in a company. They're really awesome, called Scribe, who are out of Austin here in the US, and they just were there as our kind of mentors, and they made sure that we met once a week. They made sure that we continued the process, and it didn't leave us with the. I'm too busy today. I treated it like a job of work. There you go. That's how it happened.
It's like any creative project. I was listening. I mean, we're on a podcast, and the other day I heard that something like 50% of all podcasts, wither on the vine after like 3 episodes.
Wow.
And I think that's probably the same with a lot of books. There's a lot of books we've never heard of where the author got 3 chapters in and then gave up. So I think that's great. That tenacity sounds like the secret to it. Yeah.
It's a project, Don't call it a passion, call it a project,
I love that. And we'll come back to the book. As I said, what we'll do, and I've done this a couple of times, regular listeners might know that I've done this a couple of times where we've serialized a book. So we'll dive into your book. And by the way, Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank is incredibly readable and very accessible and applicable to other people that are not banks. I enjoyed it, particularly the opening where you're talking about brand. But anyway, we'll come to that in a moment. Now I'm going to wind up to our final question. We have a regular feature, the Rockstar CMO Swimming Pool, where we throw all the bullshit, snake oil and overhyped trends that plague this industry we love. Liz, what would you chuck in there?
Oh my God, this is going to offend everyone that you and I have ever worked with, and possibly you as well. So I am rolling up personalization into a big ball, and I'm stuffing it into the swimming pool. I think that the concept of personalization has kind of held the industry back for I cannot tell you how long. It's been an obsession, which is incredibly hard to do. Is only getting harder to do, and it's time to kind of really think about. How can we be more about pulling people in? How can we think about personalization? How can we think differently about this and get rid of that whole big concept?
Well, I've only been doing personalization for just over 20 years, Liz. That's great.
I did warn you.
But you make a good point. And also nowadays, people don't say personalization. They say personalization at scale, which probably tells you that it's probably a load of bullshit now, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, no, I've been kind of talking about like my version and, our version of it is the idea of really focusing on niches or niches, as I'm forced to say in America. But that to me is kind of the movement that's much more freeing, particularly from a brand perspective, than personalization.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And that's the advice. I mean, with this podcast, the problem with it is it's not niche. It's just about marketing, which makes it difficult. But any content marketing needs to be, you really need your audience to be self-selecting rather than you deciding it's personalized, right? It's this is the thing for me at this point in the journey that I'm going to find useful. That's slightly different from personalization scale. But yes, maybe we should debate this another time. But I love this. So personalization in the swim pool. And Liz, when listeners spin the dial on the interwebs, where they're going to find you?
So you can find it's slightly long, but really quite literal website, which is called thinklikeabrandbook.com. Right. So you can find the website there. And obviously the book is available on Amazon. So think like a brand, not like a bank. You'll be able to find us quite easily there.
Nice. And I'll include a link to that in the show notes. And what about you, Liz? You're on LinkedIn, Twitter? Where do you hang out?
Oh, yeah. So I hang out on Twitter, and I need to get to the right way around, because on Mondays I tend to get it wrong. It is brand before bank. So brand, letter B, number 4, bank. You can find me there on Twitter. And LinkedIn, I'm pretty easy. There aren't very many Liz Highs around, so you can find me fairly easily on LinkedIn. All
right. Well, it's great to catch up with you, Liz. And as I say, we'll start diving into your book and a little mini-series about that. I'm looking forward to doing that too. And your book is Think Like a Brand, Not a Bank. And we'll be chatting again soon. I look forward to it.
All right.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Ian.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Liz. Her book is called Think Like a Brand, Not Like a Bank, published by Lioncrest, available in all good online bookshops and some rubbish ones too, or at thinklikeabrandbook.com. And as I mentioned, we'll be dipping back into her book in a mini-series we'll be recording next week. Right, it's the end of the week and time to wind down in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with my chum, Robert Rose, Chief Troublemaker at the Content Advisory. I'll be honest, I fucked up the invite this week, and as we record just in time on Friday night, we couldn't reschedule. So this is a replay from 2020 and episode 28, which I hope is new to most of you. And apart from some references to the pandemic, we make the same jokes, so I think it's still relevant. Hope you enjoy this. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend. Good to hear your voice and see you virtually here in the bar.
Yes.
This week I have a little bit of an end of summer, beginning of fall drink, and this one is really no muss, no fuss. I'm gonna guess you've got the ingredients for this one, because this one is truly as no muss, no fuss as it gets. It's called a blueberry hibiscus dandelion tea. And so, but in all seriousness, this is something you should be able to pick up at the local grocer. And then you just, it's literally that out of a can. And it's lovely. I should say a can. It's a glass bottle, but a container nonetheless. And a nice Reposado tequila. And this is one of those ones where you pour a little tea into the glass, you pour a little Reposado, you take a sip. Do you have the night mix? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You pour a little more tea in, you pour a little more alcohol in. You sort of just do it, pour each in until you get the right flavor and mix. And you've probably had a couple before you even take your first sip.
Yes. I was going to say you probably do that all evening.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, that, as you say, that sounds incredibly simple. Let me see what I have in my desktop bar this evening. I have what we decided was the English tequila, didn't we? I have
that's right,
gin.
English tequila.
Yeah, this week I've got Hendrix. So we've got some Hendrix. So let's stick
loyal
some
to that Hendrix brand. They should sponsor the show, I think.
I'm hoping for that. And then I was going to do like a bake-off between them and Bombay Sapphire. See who wants to go up for it. Yeah. Well, I just like gin. Did we put ice in that? You might have noticed
that too.
Yeah. Did you put ice in that?
Yes, indeed. This is a end of summer sort of sit on the porch kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And then you said a bottle of something, right? What was this bottle?
Yeah, you've got a little blueberry hibiscus dandelion tea there.
I have tonic.
Yeah, okay.
Similar?
That's close enough.
It's got botanicals in it.
Yeah, it does. All right. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Botanicals are. All right. And you said I need to taste it.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, I might have overdone it on the tonic there. Let me just try that again.
Top it off, yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's nice, Robert. And I think it's hard because I have a very refined palate, as you can imagine. I would probably need to continue to top it off, try a bit more tonic, top it off for a good couple more hours.
Yeah.
So while we're doing that, what are we chatting? So where are we actually? Where are we this week?
Oh, well, I think, before it gets cool, as this end of summer sort of wraps up here, I think we need to make a quick trip to the place where I was born, actually, which is Galveston Bay. It's in Texas, although you wouldn't recognize it as Texas. It's a very quaint little town on the coast, on the Gulf of Mexico, and over the years, it's been everything from a horrible place to be and all of that as an outlier of Houston, and now has really had a resurrection of sorts over the last, call it 15 years, and has now really come back into its own as a beautiful little bucolic town again. From what I remember, and I moved away from there when I was very young, the way it used to be, which is just a beautiful little beach town. And sitting out on the porch there, enjoying some Gulf shrimp and sipping on these as we sort of watch the sunset over the Gulf, it'd be a nice evening.
Sounds splendid. I presume. Here in the UK, in London, when somebody of notoriety has lived in a particular house, they put a blue plaque outside that tells you a little bit about the person. So presumably, you've got the equivalent there in Galveston, Texas, where it says Robert Rose lived here or something like that.
or avoid this place because he lived here. Yes.
If it's not there, I think we'll ask Dennis Shaw to pop down, and I'm sure he'll figure it out.
Oh, there we go.
The other listener.
The other listener.
Well, that sounds beautiful, and obviously you'll show me around, and we'll reminisce about your childhood. But after we've done that, we'd probably turn to marketing like we always do. What's the topic for this week?
One thing I've been thinking about recently is the differences between B2B, B2C, and needs and wants. And, I often hear, there's always a grass is greener kind of thing when you hear marketers talk about the other. One of the things that often comes up is, the B2C, they get to meet wants, right? They get to, nobody needs gym memberships or alcohol or fashion or social media apps and all of that. Or is it a need, right? Are you selling things that people need but don't necessarily want? Healthcare, electricity, fuel, insurance. Nobody wants to buy those things, but they need them and they have to buy them. And so, how do you market those things differently? And is there a difference? Is there a difference in that? And so we can open up another bottle of Hendrix, I'm sure, and get into Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But what it comes down to, I find, is that it's the interesting thing is that we need, the reason that needs and wants are not different is because if we actually do look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and go up to that self-actualization, anything we want that helps us be self-actualized is a need, right? It is something that we need to be our better selves. And so, so why do people buy things they don't need? Well, because they do need them. In other words, we believe that we need them. And so really what we're all trying to do the same thing, which is fulfill a self-actualized need for our customer. And so ultimately it's about appealing to that, that ability for people to be their best, and more evolved self. And so that's ultimately, to me, a fantastic argument for content marketing, because if we're trying, if part of our goal as marketers is to help people be their best selves, well, then we need to fulfill all of those self-actualized needs, or as many as we certainly can. I mean, I know our customers have their own responsibility to give their own needs, their own lives deeper meaning. I get all that. But so we need to be content marketers to deliver value with content around our business, because we can be the ones to help them make those, realizations. Those, we can help them along their process to help them find those things. And so it really is ultimately a business case for me when I start thinking about that needs versus want versus B2B versus B2C. Well, the heart of all of that is our ability to deliver value through inspiration, content, educational content, or entertaining content to help them be their best selves.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because, and weirdly enough, because we're still dealing with the pandemic, what brought that to mind there was the way that a lot of people reacted about their vacations here in the UK. So it was almost like it was a human right, like a need that people needed to go on vacation, which you would have thought was a want, like you were saying, right? But it does seem to be that's how people define themselves. And when they couldn't do it, they were, it was a very emotional thing for them.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, that, the higher up you go in, in that hierarchy of needs, right? I mean, you sort of, of course, physiological needs, safety, esteem, all that stuff are, as we start working up the ladder there. But as you get up to fueling potential, right? Basically self-care, which is what vacation really is. You have to conclude that at some level that is a need. And the reason it's a need is because we believe that it is, it's whether it scientifically is or not, because we believe that self-care, that self, preservation of our sanity through vacation, we absolutely believe that we need it, and thus we really do.
Yeah. And that's that drives a lot, like you say, content marketing, isn't it? It's to create that story that puts the potential customer in that where they see that need for themselves, right? They see themselves not just wanting something but needing something. Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, it's like so to use the example of your vacation and sort of as a human right, which is, that is the most, I know you all Brexited and everything, but that is the most European of all thinking, right? It's like, don't mess with our 8 weeks, man.
Well, it was really the travel that, and weirdly that you mentioned Brexit. It was like it was a British person's human right to travel to Spain. and have some sunshine for 2 weeks. It was, what are you doing to us?
But when you think about to use that example, whatever we're selling that fits into that need, right? Whether it's travel or food or restaurants or tickets of some kind for a show or whatever it is, the content, the responsibility we have as a product marketer in that is to fulfill the goal of the product, right? To fulfill the features and benefits of the product we're selling. And that's wonderful. That's marketing, right? That's just great marketing. But our content has a responsibility. Our content marketing has a responsibility to help them self-realize or be the better version of themselves as they use that product or so that they will use that product. One of the things that I often talk about in my workshops is the idea of one of the main goals of content marketing is teaching customers how to be customers, right? In other words, we're going to help them learn how to not just that our stuff is good, but how they get how they would get the most out of our stuff if they were to buy it, and show how it actually not just like gets them to a show to watch some entertainment, but why this is going to elevate their lives and that deeper meaning that is something that can, quite frankly, only be delivered through the idea of content marketing, because it is outside the features and benefits of our product typically. Yeah.
And may I flip that around a little bit from a B2B perspective? Do you think it's the opposite with B2B in that you're actually wanting your B2B buyer to want the thing that they need?
Well, that's
exactly so we're creating want. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, well, or you could even say it a different way. It's helping them realize that they need it, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Helping them realize that they don't just want it, that they actually do need it. And, you know, because a lot of times what you get in the B2B sale is, well, it's a nice to have, right? And you know, this is the classic, you know, in B2B marketing, you know, the sort of classic foil of a sale is not the competitor, it's the no decision, right?
That's true.
It's when there's no decision made at all. And this is, you know, this is where content marketing plays a huge role in the B2B sale, is to say, it's not just a nice to have that you know, we need to educate you and inspire you and raise this up in your Maslow's hierarchy of needs by educating, inspiring, or entertaining you to the point where you not only go, this would be nice to have to our business, but this is an absolute, we need this.
Yeah. And I think that's often underrepresented, isn't it, in competitive intelligence, is the do nothing.
Yeah.
Is how do we compete with do nothing? Yeah.
Because we focus in on the what you could do. Yeah. Right? You know, so this is replete in technology sales. Yeah. It's like, you could do this and you can do that and you could do this and you could do that. And the buyer goes, yeah, that would be nice, but I don't need that.
Yeah.
You know, and content marketing in an educational standpoint takes that you could do this, you know, this is the classic features and benefits arguments, takes those features and benefits and puts them into context, into how could you be a better person by doing this? You know, what value educationally or inspirationally can I give you that helps you understand that once you have this thing, you can do all those things, but you can ultimately be a better person because of this.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm feeling, I'm being slightly, I'm not being contrarian. I'm going to flip that as well, because I'm thinking as well that maybe sometimes our job as content marketers in that instance is to show them what happens when they do nothing, you know, because there's winners and losers in the market. And if you don't react, then this could happen to you. Do you see do you ever play in that sort of more negative side of content marketing?
Absolutely. You know, I will say that this is the biggest, it's funny because I'm just working on a presentation about this in thought leadership. It is the biggest missing piece for most thought leadership in B2B, which is, I call it the implications of change layer.
Yeah.
In other words, if you make this change, if you buy this enterprise CMS, if you buy this generator, you know, set of generators for your manufacturing business, what are the implications of that, good and bad? Right?
Yeah.
In other words, what are the traps that you could fall into? Most marketing and sales organizations in B2B don't going to go anywhere near that. I mean, when was the last time you heard an enterprise CMS software provider go, this is going to really suck? You know, implementing this product is going to take up 18 months of your life and it's going to be horrible. But you know, and here are all the horrible things that are about to happen to you. Here's how they can be made slightly better, right?
That would be a bold move.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Didn't your chum Joe Paluzzi talk about this on something where he was talking about how you should outline exactly what happens if you subscribe to my newsletter? I'm going to email you, and then I'm going to. I think he did something like that, but it was a similar sort of thing. Was it you? I'm sorry, my friend. Joe takes all the credit for your work.
Yes, he does. But that's fine.
I'm sorry, mate. Yeah, it's exactly that, isn't it? Is if you tell people what you're going to do with their data, then would that work?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Were you at least talking to Joe when you said it?
No, I wasn't actually. I was writing something.
I think now you stop the weekly wrap, I've completely forgotten about it.
Well, that's common in my world. I'm easily forgotten. That's my t-shirt.
Yeah. That's not true. I know that there's a lot of consternation in the content marketing world with you stopping the weekly wrap, but I'm not going to go on about that again this week because that was clumsy last time. So that's a great thought. So we need to so we need to think about how in B2B and B2C how we make people not just want our things but need our things, and that's what we do with our content marketing. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I think it's the opportunity, right? When people go, well, what is the point of trying to, when you think of content marketing beyond just like frivolous sort of cat videos, and you say, what is the point of all of that? The point is that we can teach our customers to be better customers or teach our customers how to be customers, but all of that is in the context of helping our customers become better people, not just smarter because they bought our product, but smarter because they bought our product and learned how to do something better with it. That's at the heart of a great content marketing strategy, which is helping people understand that what it is we're delivering to them doesn't just, ultimately give them some shiny new thing. It gives them a shiny new thing that helps them move along a process, move along in their lives. That's the opportunity. And when I think about it like that, it's a great business case for it because that's a differentiator that many of our competitors probably aren't availing themselves of.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thought. And is that something you've written about? Seeing as I am forgetting about anything you've actually done, but
you'll shortly forget about them, so it doesn't really matter.
I think Joe said something about this, didn't he, once?
Yes. You can get that at joepalizzi.com
but we can find you at contentadvisory.net, correct? I'll at least remember that.
Indeed. You can indeed. Or you can forget about me on social media as well at Robert_Rose on Twitter.
Yes, splendid. Well, as if I remember to come down to the bar next week, will I see you there?
You will.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Robert.
Excellent.
Hope you agree that was well worth replaying, and definitely I have figured out Bloody Outlook, and so we'll have something fresh for you next week. So, that's a wrap on episode 133 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. I've been your host, Ian Truscott. Thanks again to Jeff, Liz and Robert for sharing their insight. Please say hello to them. I'll include all their links in the show notes, which you can find on your favourite podcast app or at rockstarcmo.com, where you can also find all our previous episodes. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track and jiving along with us. So, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let us know on the socials, or please drop a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff Clark will be in the studio. I go backstage with Spectrum CEO Max Koziak to discuss B2C conversational marketing, and Robert Rose will be back in the bar. Until then, have a great week, and I hope you'll again join us here next week on Rockstar CMO FM.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.